tuned into a new show that's dedicated to exposing the truth, educating the youth, revealing secrets, and providing real solutions. Who are we? We are TCC Global TV. Real TV for real life.
It's the show that brings up real issues and the show that gives real solutions, where everyone's voice is heard. It's the new hit dog show, Our Voice, on KVRN, hosted by Craig Richardson, Thursday nights at 6 p.m.
This is our voice. This is our voice. Welcome. This is our voice. This is our voice.
Thank you for tuning in to Our Voice, KVRN. Today is a good day, amen. Today we have a special guest. She's actually one of my church members, an awesome woman of God. Her name is Miss Mia Prime Williams. How you doing, Miss Williams?
I'm good, thank you.
Ain't God good?
Yes, it is.
It's good to have you here. It's good to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. This is a day, I really, you have so many different testimonies and so many things that's worth talking about, but we're going to stay on topic. We're going to bring back and talk about some of the other things that you have experience with, and I'm just going to call one of them. We just talked about you are a breast cancer survivor.
I am 8 years. Praise the Lord.
8 years. That's a good number. You know, and so October's coming back around. That's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we're gonna make sure we have you back on the show in October to give your testimony, because people need to know what God can do and how good God is.
Most certainly.
Amen. Amen. Today we're gonna talk about you a little bit. We're gonna go, in your past a little bit and talk about what you've been a part of, what organizations, and what you're fighting for these days. You are what's your career right now? What are you doing?
Right now, I am what one would consider maybe a social revolutionary.
Oh wow! Okay.
I work for a state agency that helps organizations look at their policies and practices to ensure that they're being equitable across racial lines.
Okay, so you want to make sure everything's being done equally and fairness.
Absolutely.
That way, everyone is represented fairly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, what's one of the agencies that you're connected with?
Well, originally, the way my career started in social work is I was a supervisor and a caseworker with Children's Protective Services for over 15 years.
Okay.
And during the time that I was there, Texas, of all states, created a law, Senate Bill 6, where they wanted CPS to look at why is it that so many African American children were coming into the foster care system but remaining at a higher rate than any other race or ethnicity. And so from that point, after there was somewhat of a change in the CPS system, the commissioner at that time felt that it was a need to do this work across different areas. Okay. And so not only do we look at systemic inequities in Children's Protective Services, but we also look at those systemic inequities in education, juvenile justice, mental health, and health, and the list goes on and on.
So all across the board, and so it started off with CPS.
It did, yes.
And when they saw the need for it, they expanded it to different other agencies.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, the juvenile system, that's one area.
Yes.
How are we looking at that? What's the demographics of that?
What we know across the state of Texas, that there is a large population of African Americans and Latino boys and girls that end up in the juvenile justice system. And when we look at those statistics, although if you just look at them the way they are without being broken down by race and ethnicity, it looks like maybe Texas is doing okay.
Yeah.
But in comparison to their makeup in the population, that's where the disproportionality and disparities come into play.
Okay, so when you look at the fact that what other than how many African American males are in the system, what else are we looking at in the juvenile system?
What we're looking at is we want agencies to begin looking at why is it that out of every race and ethnicity, more African Americans come in contact with the juvenile justice system. We're looking at those systemic issues, what is causing it, and we know that based on our work and our theories is that it's based on our history of our country, and that's what it all goes back to, and history is consistently repeating itself over and over again.
And it seems like we want to, and correct me if I'm wrong, stay away from the word racism, and give it a name where people can kind of cope with it, and make it more a professional name, and try to fix the numbers here and there, but it ultimately boils down to racism.
Absolutely. We want to term it as institutional racism, because what it is, if you look at it based on the data, in every system, African Americans tend to fare the worst. We have more African Americans in special education classes. We have more African Americans in the child welfare system. We have more African Americans with high rates of obesity, high rates of asthma. So is it something innately wrong with African Americans and people of color, or is it the system? And we believe that it's the system's policies that keep perpetuating this phenomenon that we feel.
Well, of course, I'm an African black male and African American black male. And I've had my touch in with the law, and I had to learn the hard way. And when I was I went to court for I had a business, DNA testing, drug testing, and I brought a young man a car at my church because he couldn't get back and forth to work. I used my EIN number, and because they told me I could do that, I could file my taxes and get my money back. Well, evidently he did the law wrong, and it ended up coming back as if I was fraudulently doing something, you know, but it's my government EIN number. It ended up matching a lady Social Security number in New York.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, it's just an honest mistake. Somebody made a boo-boo. They're going to see what's going on. They're going to correct this thing, and whoever did wrong will get in trouble. It didn't work like that. I got lawyers, and I got arrested, and my lawyers came, and they threw out all my lawyers' paperwork. They wouldn't listen to anything that my lawyers was bringing, which was also African American. Didn't listen to anything they had to say, kicked them out of court, and then told me I had a mental issue. They told me I had hyper-religiosity, because they caught me praying in court. Okay, I'm a mama's boy. I don't know nothing about the court, you know.
Right.
So, but the reason I'm mentioning that is because many African American men with no background would find themselves caught in a system that they don't know anything about. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know the laws. And then you go get a black lawyer, thinking that they understand the system, but those black lawyers don't have any authority in the court system either. And it threw me off because I'm like, why am I'm going to jail for something that was a mistake? But that was the best thing that happened to me because I learned so much when I went to jail. So that's my testimony. We have to talk about that another day. But just to see, when I went to jail, I saw so many African Americans, young men in that unit that it really made me think something is wrong. And they have longer sentences.
Absolutely.
You know, this guy, because I did my investigations while I was locked up. This guy has the same crime. He has 4 years, and this African American young man, he got 16 years for the same exact thing. You know, so but.
You know, it's interesting that you say that when you look at the different dynamics, because what studies show is that a white male with a high school diploma and a criminal record has a better chance of getting a job or employment than a black man with no criminal record.
Wow.
You know, if you look at how the criminal justice system is set up, when I was talking about history, remember I talked about history before? In America today, when they collect data on drug charges, it's only broken down by whites and black. So where do the Latino people fit? You wonder, right? Do Latino people use drugs? Yes, Latino people use drugs, but they're categorized as white.
Wow.
And see, a lot of people don't know that, and that's based on a system that's been in place since the early 1930s, where in this country they don't break down drug offenses by race and ethnicity, because in this country there are two races, white and black.
Wow.
Latino is considered an ethnicity.
Okay.
You know, and so I think it's really important that we as a people, or just America in general understands that this historical implications that's been going on for centuries is not, it hasn't went away. It's only changed its clothes.
Wow.
It's the same mindset, because why is it that even after the Civil Rights Movement, let's go back even further, 1930s with the Social Security Act, and when it came out, and we've had so many amendments, and we've got the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act, and the Women's Suffrage Act. We have all these acts, but at the end of the day, who continues to have the worst outcomes? African Americans. And so it's not the people. We believe that there's some systemic change that needs to take place in order for it to be equitable across all lines.
What's some of those systemic changes that you think need to be done?
I'm glad you asked. Some of those systemic changes needs to be where agencies have to be willing to be vulnerable. They have to be willing to let their guard down, which is what something CPS did back around 2005. There was one pastor. He went over to the CPS building right around the corner here and picketed all by himself. That one man made a significant change, Pastor Herschel Walker. And he did that right over there. And what that ended up doing is that brought attention to him. And with him came his issue, which is why is it that so many black children are coming to the system. What ended up happening is they brought him to the table and they actually listened to him. And if the systems would be willing to relinquish some of their power and allow themselves to be vulnerable, hear from the citizens that they're consistently bringing into their system to find out, okay, what is it that we can do for you, as opposed to the system prescribing what families and communities need.
Now, I know, because I was on the committee at St. Stephen's, there in Carson City, Living Word now, with Pastor Landry. And one of the things that we was working on doing is doing a program where black families help black families. And churches get involved. Is that still in the works?
It's still in the works. We're still trying to nurture and cultivate that program, and hopefully it'll really get up off the ground running, and it will be something that can be replicated across the state.
Amen. Well, I'm just happy that somebody is doing something, because I get so upset when I see my people in those low places, and it's like we're stuck down there. And so I believe what you believe. I believe if we as a people stand up, not be afraid of any type of retaliation, that we can make a difference, like that pastor did. And we need to begin to picket, begin to change laws, hold politicians accountable. And I believe that I talked about this last week, that I believe that if we affect their money, if we affect their money, then we can see change. And I'm going to say this till the day I die, till the day it happens, that if we can get organized, if we can become unified, then we can become a strong force and create change. But again, it's about money. Corporate America is only doing what they're doing because of money. So if we stand up and say, okay, Rosa Parks, she stood up, and we start riding the bus. And it caused the bus company to lose money. And we've seen change.
In Montgomery, Alabama, people looked at how they were being impacted negatively by their society. And they assumed responsibility for change.
Joanne Robinson was an English professor at Alabama State University, and she headed up an organization called the Women's Political Council. Joanne Robinson had an episode on the Montgomery bus where she is accosted by a bus driver, and she leaves the bus, in terror. She thought the bus driver was going to hit her, as he demanded she sit in the black-only section in an almost empty bus. When she talked to other women in the Women's Political Council about this episode, she found out that they had similar experiences. There were a number of arrests in 1955 of black women who were violating the segregation ordinance on the buses. And on the night of December 1st, when Rosa Parks is arrested, Joanne Robinson springs into action, and they actually execute this plan to initiate a bus boycott.
At the time, most people rode the bus to kind of get around. There weren't as many cars on the road. So you begin to realize that if we don't ride the buses, we are able to kind of break the system to a great degree.
Joanne Robinson comes on campus late that night with a couple of students, runs off 50,000 flyers. The next morning, between classes, they pass out these flyers. She calls a civil rights attorney, Fred Gray. She calls E.D. Nixon, labor organizer, really the recognized leader of Black Montgomery. And they decide to endorse the boycott. They organize the Montgomery Improvement Association to execute and to coordinate the activities surrounding the Montgomery bus boycott. And they select this newcomer, Martin Luther King, to head up the Montgomery Improvement Association. Martin Luther King weaves into Montgomery ideas about love and civil disobedience, overcoming adversity.
And the people of Montgomery were willing not only to listen, but to act on this.
I was the NAACP Youth Council president, and I participated in the boycott. I walked to school, and we just saw the empty buses go by because there were no Black people on them.
At the time that this movement began here, we had about 50,000 African Americans living in Montgomery, and there were pretty close to 50,000 Black people who worked together during this bus boycott.
We stayed off the buses and found other ways to get to where we needed to go.
And so they bought station wagons, and they had an actual route, just like buses have routes.
For several weeks, I was a volunteer driver every day, going out and just hauling people to work or to school.
So people just didn't walk. They rode, but they rode on a system that they created. 382 days. That's a long time. Can you imagine how empowered people felt? It's like, we did what?
The Montgomery bus boycott says to the nation that segregation is no longer the law of the land, and that the formula for attacking segregation in all of its facets is going to be nonviolent civil disobedience on one hand and litigation on the other.
The boycott was one of the greatest examples of civic engagement of the 20th century.
So we are so used to our comfortable living that we don't want to get involved. Even
Until it happens to us
exactly,
personally.
I was just going to say that. Until something happens in our life that makes our emotions get riled up.
Absolutely.
So I'm at the point now, look, regardless if it's in my family, it's a problem that my culture is dealing with.
Absolutely.
So why don't we just stand up now before it happens to someone in my family? Because I was watching YouTube early before I came, and I'm watching these African American families go to court, and their children are just being snatched away from them with no real cause. You know, I've called you a couple of times when I have a friend of mine will be at the hospital, baby just been born, and because he looks aggressive, they call him CPS. He's a boxer. You know, don't mean he's aggressive. That's he does that for
and you know, it's interesting that you say that because we as a people have been fed this narrative.
Yeah.
And when we are fed this narrative through media, it leads us to kind of become fearful of with these stereotypes. You know, just because you see someone that's tall, black, and big and burly or whatever, that he's aggressive. Not necessarily so. And I think that's where we get caught up in this cycle where we just simply look at someone and then base our judgment solely on what we see.
What we see. Now, that's one of the issues that I've been dealing with because I mentor so many men, and not going too far left. I've had brothers call me and say, "Look, man, I'm in jail. Why are you in jail? Trespassing. Where were you going? I'm just walking through a park, and there's happened to be private property of a bigger park, a building that everyone else goes through, but if he looks aggressive, they assume that he's up to no good." And it gets tiresome to see brothers calling me on a daily basis. And I'm only one person. And I try my best to do what I can and say what I can to whoever I need to talk to. But I'm constantly seeing the mindset of Americans, other than Caucasians, some Spanish, because seems like everyone is offended by the black man. When you look at government agencies. And this is another thing. I'm not trying to. I have an issue with us being in the government agencies and treating us like the other ones treat us.
And you know, the reason being is that that's where that systemic racism starts, because the system itself was built on racist policies.
Yeah.
And so once you get into that system, you become a part of the system.
Wow.
And that's why you see that, because even here in Harris County, the majority of the CPS caseworkers are African American. I would say over 75% of the caseworkers are African American, and about 64% of the children that are currently in foster care are African American, taken by African American
And that's
social
why it's
workers.
on YouTube.
And exactly, and so if you think about it, it's not necessarily, and what we do see is that sometimes as African Americans we have what I've come to know as internalized racial oppression, that we've been oppressed for so long that the only way that we as a people, you know, it has a tendency to manifest itself in other ways, like what we'd like to call exaggerated visibility. You know, when you see a brother walking across the street and he see a car coming and he's slowly walking, because that's all a part of that internalized racial oppression. That's something that's been so deeply ingrained in us from centuries and centuries of being oppressed that it's almost like the norm now. And until we begin to really address that, we as a people, this is just my opinion, that we don't have enough self-love.
Exactly.
We don't really love ourselves, and so with that being said, we don't have the ability to allow others in. You know, it's a real complicated, but until we start having these difficult conversations with people that don't necessarily look like us, that's when I feel the pendulum is going to swing, when people of other ethnicities begin to validate our oppressive nature.
I'm thinking about putting together a conference of all different cultures, just one table, conference table, and every culture represents themselves on that one table, and have you come.
Okay.
And I believe, because one thing you said, let's talk to them. We know our issues, you know, and we know what we need to do, even though we're not doing it. Now, when you're looking at CPS, the juvenile system, what other systems you looking at?
Education.
Education.
Education is a big one.
Okay, now what's going on?
With education, what we're finding, and this is something that our President Obama, has made very, very clear, that there are more African Americans are punished in a more harsher manner than any other ethnicity. There was a huge study that a lot of folks don't really know about, done by Texas A&M University, where they looked at the reasons why is it that African Americans, no, actually they were looking at the discipline rates, and it was an extensive study. They followed all 7th graders in the state of Texas. They pulled every single record of 7th graders, and they looked at it from 7th to 12th grade, and then 2 years beyond, because we know kids graduate at different rates. And what they found is that when it came to those mandatory punishments, that's like, you know, if a kid brings a knife to school, then this will happen. Or if he brings a gun to school, then this will happen. But then when it came to those issues like that discretionary stuff, you know, your shirt tail is out, or you have on house slippers or something. When it came to those type of infractions, African Americans fared the worst.
So for the educational system, holding them accountable to their own systematic rules. And upholding those rules by throwing those rules back in their face.
Absolutely.
They're trying to throw your child out, throw the rules. And 9 times out of 10, you'll find out there is some infractions in those rules.
Absolutely.
If you just pay attention.
Absolutely.
And get your emotions.
Absolutely.
And get smart on it.
Yes.
One thing I've learned is that when we go to the schools or wherever, and we're upset because of how we've been treated, if we go in all emotional, and we go in with an attitude, we go in, they're not going to listen to us.
You know, there's a saying, a friend of mine said some years back, she's like, your personality is so loud that I can't hear you.
Wow.
That we come in and we're so inflated with emotions and my baby this or whatever, and I totally understand it because I'm a mother too. And when it comes to our children, we're like mama bears, we want to protect. However, there's a way in which you do that. You take the words that are there, make yourself familiar with the policies and practices of the school, because that is your ammunition. Also, if a child has been diagnosed with a learning disability, There are so many accommodations that the state and that the school is required to provide for our children, and we don't know anything about. Those assistive technology accommodations, you know, if your child is being diagnosed, because they want to diagnose all children with ADHD. However, I do understand that, because as a people, we do not really adequately address mental health issues, but that's a whole different show. But there are accommodations that our children are entitled to with that label, because a lot of times the school will push parents to label their children. However, they know that you don't know the rest that goes along with it.
And they're getting funded for that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Title IV is one of the most misused funding source in the country. Title IV.
And that's for no.
Title IV is for all of that. It's for those additional accommodations. It's for to address impoverished communities. But does that money really go back into those students? Oftentimes it does not.
Wow. And so so I want to make sure that everyone got that. For parents, cousins, uncles, aunties, whoever, grandparents, we need to hold school districts and the schools itself accountable to their own rules.
Yes.
Read your rule book. Read the rule book. You signed it.
Yes.
You should have read it before you signed it, but 9 times out of 10.
Right, because our kids are putting pressure on us. Hey, mom, just sign this so I can get my points at school. But we don't take time to read it. And even if you do sign it, just make sure that you're familiar with those terms, with those policies.
Make a copy of it.
Absolutely,
Absolutely. And so that's the key as it relates to the educational system and being involved in your child's life. Is a part of the solution. Being involved with your teachers.
Yes.
Get their email address.
Yes.
Communicate good email. Get the phone number. I know things go a lot faster nowadays than the old days, and sometimes teachers don't have time to actually call you.
Right.
Email address.
Emails.
Is real quick.
Absolutely.
You can get out what you need to get out, and it's a written documentation.
Absolutely.
That you can go back and look at
Yes,
and prove
sir.
to the school board or whoever it might be. I've been trying to talk to this teacher.
Yes.
He or she has not been responding back to me.
Absolutely.
Here's my proof.
Yes.
And so those are things that we can do in the educational system with our children, and it's very important that we do those things because our children, they need us.
Yes.
They need us to be their advocates.
Absolutely.
And then we go to looking at, let's go back to CPS. What can a family do if something happens where their child is removed from the home? What can they do?
They need to be able, again, there are certain rights and responsibilities as a parent that you have. What we do know is that when you have resources, when I say resources, when you have that almighty dollar, that speaks volumes. But we do know that the majority of the families that come in contact with Children Protective Services make less than $10,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
So it's mostly impacting poor people that are becoming involved with these state agencies. And what we do know based on the data is that the longer you're in the system, the worse your outcomes are.
Yeah. Wow.
And so with CPS, you have to push for your rights. You have to ask questions. There is a process that if you're not getting in each agency, there is a place that you can contact in order to get your needs met. If you don't get them, just keep going up the chain. And if you don't get your needs met or your questions answered, there is always a higher power.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate to say it in those terms, but there is. And so there is a way, it's the Ombudsman, OMBUDSMAN, of the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. People can, if you go on that website, it'll tell you your rights, but a lot of times we don't read. We perish because of lack of knowledge. We don't want to read. We want something quick, fast, and in a hurry. We're in like a microwave type society. We just want to pop it in, and then all our troubles will be over, but it doesn't work that way. It takes some kneading and when your grandparents used to make bread, they didn't just put the yeast and the flour all together and just throw it in the oven. No, it took a process. They had to roll it out and pat it. They had to do a lot of manipulating to it, and that's, as a people, that's what we have to do as it relates to our knowledge. We've got to feed our brains. We've got to feed ourselves to understand what our rights and responsibilities are.
And we have to be in a place where we're willing to catch up.
Absolutely.
Because we're so far behind.
Yes.
Parents are far behind.
Yes.
Our families are so far behind. And because sometimes, you can be so behind on something that you lose your drive to move forward. And I believe that's one of the areas that we need to get past. Because we always need to fight. We always need to press forward to get into a place that we can be successful. But again, I believe that we're so used to just letting everything be where everything is going to be, and we're not fighting anymore.
You know, and it's interesting that you say that because I like to term it as being anesthetized. You know, when you go into surgery, and they give you the anesthesia, you just out. You don't even know what's going on, and that's how we've become as relates to issues pertaining to our children. We've just become, oh, that's just how they work. That's just, and the systems. We think the system is too big to fight. But no, it's not.
It's not.
The system is there to provide a service.
Yeah, and we, again, like you said earlier, this is what God told me. Use the same system against them
absolutely.
that they use against you. It's a system.
It is.
The system is bigger than them.
Yes.
And if anyone can fit in the system and get some and benefit from the system if they go by the rules of the system.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Not saying that when you look at the justice system, of course, we have some contaminations in there.
Absolutely.
And I even had put together some things as relations to how do we fight the justice system? How do we, that's a deep question, how do we get to a point where justice is prevailed really in the justice system? Because as African Americans, we know that we have the short end of the stick in that area of the justice system.
We have the short end of the stick in everything.
Right.
And so again, is something inherently wrong with us as a people? No,
it's the system.
It's the system.
It's the system. And this is what I came up with. I'm in the process of creating a website. And what this website does, going to do, is it's going to have all the prisons, addresses, and every politician connected with that prison, every news media, every TV station that's connected to that area, and have a reporting system. Not just the prisons, but for judges, for lawyers, for police officers, for schools. Everything has an upward. See, the thing is, a lot of times people don't report stuff because they don't know who to report it to. But if they have it on one website, this is an infraction that was done to my child. Where do I go? Go straight to the website. What school district? What school was it? This is the principal. This is the person over her or the person over him. Blah blah blah. Go straight up the chain, and all the emails will be on there. And if that doesn't work, you got email to Channel 2 News. You know, because once, you know what I'm saying? Because media is a strong force that we're not using to get the job done.
Yes.
You know, so like that, like the pastor who walked with the sign.
Yes.
You know, he was bring attention to a matter.
Yes.
That the news media could do the same thing.
Absolutely.
You know, so I just know that if we get to that place where we can get together, we can stop trying to be in competition with each other and become a family of a culture and begin to work for a common good, I think things will start coming together. I really do. I really do.
We just gotta be able, again, put our egos aside.
Yeah.
And be willing to be vulnerable and bring all of our thoughts and passions and desires to the table for the common good.
Exactly.
And until we can get there, but again, we still gotta understand where we came from, and we don't. If we really take a historical account of how each of these systems were designed and created. If you think about it, they were never created and designed for black people. No, they were not. And so if you think about it, the civil rights movement forced systems to open their doors to let us in. But the mindset had never changed. Think about it. If I decided, okay, I work at a hospital, I'm at Texas Children's, and we're having such great results with the kids with this particular science or whatever, I want to start doing it on adults, right?
Yeah.
But I leave all the same furniture. Adults can't fit in baby beds. And if you think about, that's essentially what has happened. The civil rights movement came, they were forced to allow people in, but the policies and practices never changed.
Now I heard that, look at food stamps.
Yeah.
Now this, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that food stamp was not meant for African Americans.
It was created for wives and children of World War II veterans when they went across to fight. They had to have something in place. So that's how welfare started. And again, the biggest consumers of food.
We're gonna get back together.
Yes.
And when we get back together for this topic, we're gonna have a plan.
Yes.
And I'm gonna get with you on, you said, get together and create a forum, some type of gathering.
Yes.
Where we can actually begin to create a system where we can go forward.
Absolutely, and I would like to be able just to impart some knowledge into our people, especially when you look at the history, because a lot of folks don't even know the history of all of these institutions, how they were created. And once you understand how they're created, then you'll understand why you continue to see the results.
I had no idea.
Yes.
I had no idea what these systems. All we knew is they're here.
Yes.
Food stamps is here.
Yes.
Prisons. Are
Yes.
Here. You know,
Yes.
all these different organizations, they're here. Not realizing what, when, and why they were developed. You know, so I just want to thank you for coming today. Of course, again, it won't be the last visit. You know, and we're going to put some things together. So I want to thank everyone for listening. And again, I want to pray for our parents. I want to pray for our students. I want to pray for those caught up in the systematic agencies. Amen. So, Father God, we thank you, God. We thank you for your grace and mercy, God. We thank you for all that you've done, God. We know, God, that everything that you've done, God, is going to manifest in our life. It's going to be a positive thing, Father God. We thank you for what you're doing. God, we know the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but God, you say you come to give life and give it more abundantly, Father God. We thank you, Father God. We glorify you, God. We just ask you, God, to touch every child, Father God, every young adult, every African American, God, that's struggling right now, Father God. We know, God, that you are able to fix every situation. But God, you say faith without works is dead, Father God. So God, we want to apply our works to our faith, Father God. Give us the mindset to create change. Give us the ideas, God, to implement, God. Give us the things that we need, Father God, to gather the hearts of our people, Father God, that we may begin.
Stand on my word. Against all odds will you